These are 10 players you should be avoiding in fantasy football at cost. But before we get into it, grab your coffee, grab your energy drink. We got a white monster as always. And while you're doing that, before we get started, please like this video and subscribe. It helps me out more than you know. Let's jump into it. Starting at number 1, Christian McCaffrey. Yes, I know he's CMC, but hear me out for a second. Since 2013, only 2 running backs finished as top 12 backs the following year after leading the league in touches. CMC had 417 touches last year, including the playoffs. So that in itself is not a good sign. I mean, look at Josh Jacobs. After he was the rushing champ for Vegas the following year, which was last year, he was pretty bad. Now, I know Christian and Jacobs are 2 different backs, 2 different levels of talent, but still. And then you add on top of that the fact that Christian's 28 years old, which is getting older for a running back. But I think most importantly, he's already hurt, and it's not just soreness, right, or aches and pains. Like, he has a calf injury. Calf injuries are a horrible injury to have because they linger. It's hard for them to heal. It takes a while for them to heal, and it's very easy to re-injure them. Furthermore, I think San Francisco is going to preserve CMC as best as they can this year because this is probably their last shot with these core guys to win the Super Bowl. So they're going to be smart with Christian. They're not going to overwork him, and that's not great for fantasy. On top of that, over the past 10 years, the consensus number 1 player taken in fantasy drafts has never repeated and has finished top 5 just twice. So all in all, the 101 is cursed. CMC is already hurt. He's getting older, and they're going to manage his reps this year. Give me Bijan and Brees easily over Christian. At number 2, Devonte Adams. Last year was the first year since 2015 that Adams wasn't a top 12 fantasy wide receiver. He saw his yards per target, yards per route run were his worst marks since 2017. And yes, a lot of it can be blamed on the poor quarterback play with Aiden O'Connell, Jimmy G. But the quarterback situation is the same this year. It's Aiden O'Connell. Gardner Minshew has been named the starter, who's just not a good quarterback. And just touching a little bit on last year first, before we get too carried away, Adams went over 100 receiving yards 3 times last year, and in 2 of those games, it required 20-plus targets due to very inefficient, inaccurate quarterbacks, which is continuing this year. On top of that, Adams was second in targets with 175 targets on the year, only behind CeeDee Lamb, and he still only finished as the wide receiver 15. So when a guy sees that much work in the passing game, that high of a target share, and there's still only wide receiver 15, that's horrible. And it really has nothing to do with Adams. Like, maybe he took a step back slightly, and he is a year older this season, 31 years old, entering his age 32 season with not great quarterback play on a Vegas team that's going to be a bottom 5 offense. They're not going to be in scoring position often. Antonio Pierce is the type of head coach that just wants to run the football and play good defense. This is not going to be an exciting team. And then on top of that, they just added more target competition with Brock Bowers, stud tight end. He might as well just be a wide receiver at this point. So Devonte is just a horrible pick in round 2. There's just so many better options with more upside. At number 3, another guy that's just a bad value in drafts, and that's Sam Laporta. Yes, he's coming off a historic season where he broke fantasy football. He ranked top 5 at the position in catches, targets, and yards. He had 10 touchdowns. And he's just an animal. He's a special player. He's an extremely talented guy. But he's an end of round 2, early round 3 pick. I mean, that's just way too expensive on a Lions offense that's absolutely stacked with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs. You could argue Laporta is 3rd in the passing game in Detroit. And Laporta is a touchdown regression candidate as he had 10 scores last year. I just don't see that continuing this season. It just feels like you're drafting Laporta at his ceiling when you can get Trey McBride 2 or 3 rounds later, depending on your league size, what platform you draft on. I'd just rather take a wide receiver or a running back in round 2, round 3, while there's a lot of good options still on the board. At number 4, Mike Evans. What a stud Evans was last year. What a steal in fantasy. You got him in round 6, round 7 last season. He had his 10th straight 1,000-yard year. Every year that he's been in the league, he's went over 1,000 receiving yards. He's phenomenal. He's a future Hall of Famer. And he had a career year last year, to many people's surprise, with Baker Mayfield. He had the most targets, catches and yards since 2018. And last year, Evans had arguably one of his best years of his career. He had the most targets, receptions, and yards since 2018. He led the league with 13 touchdowns. He's clearly a major touchdown regression candidate after scoring 13 of his team's 28 receiving scores. I mean, that's just not sustainable. That's absolutely insane. Tampa Bay loses Dave Canale as their offensive coordinator. He's now the head coach for Carolina. I think he really helped this offense play above their belt, if you will. I don't think they're that good of a team. I think a lot of it was coaching. Some of it was luck. Tampa Bay's just not an offense I want to bet on this year with new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. They're going to put Chris Godwin now in the slot, which could result to more work for Godwin. And you're just putting a lot of faith in Baker Mayfield, who outside of last year has proven to just not be a very good quarterback. At number 5, Stefan Diggs. You're going to start to catch on to a little bit of a theme here. Big name players who are getting older, who are at the tail ends of their career. I just don't prefer to draft, especially guys who switch teams and are in a whole new situation. That is Stefan Diggs, who last year was not a good football player, where he was the number 1 target with one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Josh Allen. From week 10 on last year, Diggs averaged 42 receiving yards per game. That is just terrible. That is not just unlucky. That is Stefan telling you he's slowing down. He's not the same player. And he saw 160 targets for Buffalo with nearly no target competition. Like Gabe Davis. I know Dalton Kincaid was a rookie. Didn't see a ton of work. Like James Cook, like he had no one to compete for targets with. And he still couldn't get it done. And now he's going to Houston, who has a loaded offense with Tank Dell, Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, Dalton Schultz. Like, there's just not going to be enough to go around. And on top of that, you have to spend a 3rd-round pick to get Stefan. Like, he's one of the worst values in all fantasy football because while he's still a fine player, you're buying him at his ceiling, and he's on a team now where he could be the 3rd option in the passing game. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think Diggs is going to be the odd man out in Houston. Like, CJ Stroud has such a rapport with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. I just don't see a world where Stefan Diggs leads this team in targets, and I just don't see how he could have an exceptional year. It's not like he went from a bad quarterback to a good quarterback. He's going from one elite quarterback to the next, where his situation got worse. So he's an easy fade in round 3. At number 6, Travis Kelce. For the first time since 2015, Kelce failed to go over 1,000 yards receiving. He's clearly starting to decline. Like, he showed it last year. I know Kelce went crazy in the playoffs. Like, that was impressive. But most of what we saw in the regular season was a player that's getting older, a player that doesn't really have the juice that he used to have. And this is similar to Christian McCaffrey in the sense that I think Kansas City is going to preserve their Hall of Fame tight end. So they have him healthy in the playoffs so they can go after that three-peat. If you want a piece of this Kansas City offense, take Rashad White so you can get 4 rounds later. I understand Travis Kelce is still a stud. Mahomes is still going to look for him. I'm not saying Travis is going to fall off the face of the earth, but a round 2 pick for a 35-year-old tight end who has a ton of target competition with Rashad Rice, Worthy, Hollywood, Isaiah Pacheco is going to have a big season. He's just not a guy I want to bet on at that cost. At number 7, Rashad White, going back to that Bucs offense that I think sees a little bit of a decline in the overall play of the offense. And Rashad White is just such a terribly inefficient player. There's no other way to put it. He was just one of the worst backs from a metric standpoint last year. 42nd in missed tackles forced, 40th in explosive run rate, 45th in yards after contact per attempt. The only reason why he was a strong fantasy running back was because of his 64 receptions. Like, that was just unbelievable. And on top of that, he had no competition for touches out of that backfield. That won't be the case this season with the Bucs spending a 3rd or 4th round pick on Bucky Irving. He's a really good back. He's a downhill runner. He plays bigger than he is. He's a pass down back. I think Irving is going to eat into White's work. If you draft White in round 4 expecting him to get a ton of work in the passing game, and that doesn't happen under new offensive coordinator Cohen or with Bucky Irving now in the mix, then you're going to be really disappointed because White is not a guy who's going to break away, score from 30 yards out. He survives on volume, pass down work, and touchdown opportunities. And I just don't think he sees enough of that for the reasons that I just explained this year to warrant a 4th round pick. He, in my opinion, has bust written all over him. At number 8, Malik Neighbors. I love the player. Like, Neighbors is probably going to be the next Jamar Chase. He's that good. I just hate the situation. So this has nothing to deal with Malik whatsoever. It's all about Daniel Jones, who has yet to reach 7 yards per pass attempt in any of his first 5 NFL seasons, along with never throwing more than 3,200 yards. Like, Daniel Jones is a backup quarterback in the NFL. He should be a backup quarterback in the NFL. He's just not really good. Like, looking at the 6 games that Jones played last year, he posted a dismal 70.5 passer rating with 2 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions. I don't care how bad that offensive line was last year. I've just seen enough with Daniel Jones, and drafting a really good wide receiver with a bad quarterback is just a nightmare for fantasy. Like, look at Desmond Ridder and Drake London last year. Everyone thought this was the year London was going to explode. He was just dragged down by poor quarterback play, terrible coaching. I think we see the same situation with Neighbors this year. And you have to pay up if you want Malik on your team this year. He's a round 4 pick. If you want to be left with major headaches and frustration and stress, then yeah, draft Malik. Is Neighbors gonna have these monster games where he goes for over 100 yards? He has a long score, of course. But is he gonna be a consistent fantasy contributor for your team? No. I think he's gonna be a headache. I think he's gonna be inconsistent. And elite wide receivers can't fix poor quarterbacks. This Giants offense is probably gonna be in a mess. They won't be in scoring position often. They won't be able to sustain many drives either. With Saquon Barkley gone, like, who else do they have on this team? Like, triple cover Neighbors, and like, that's how you beat the Giants. They have no one else on this offense. Jalen Hyatt, sure, but like Devin Singletary, this offense is going to be a disaster, and I don't want to spend a high pick on a player that's really good that's just in a horrible situation. Like, your first 4 rounds, you need to be drafting talented players. Obviously, they're all talented, but on good offenses with good quarterbacks that will be able to sustain drives and be in scoring position often. That's just like a basic rule of thumb. At number 9, Keenan Allen, another guy who's coming off a phenomenal season. I just don't prefer to bet on a 32-year-old wide receiver headed to a new team with a ton of target competition and a rookie quarterback. Like, he's going in round 6, right around where Rashad Rice goes. Give me Rashad Rice every day of the week. Like, Allen has proven that he also can't stay healthy, as he hasn't finished each of his last 2 seasons. I just don't see a world where Keenan Allen is this target monster with DJ Moore, 9th overall pick Rome Odunze. He's just not an exciting selection at that spot. Keenan Allen succeeded so much in LA with Herbert because he was a target monster. He dominated out of the slot. He saw a ton of receptions. Like, I just don't think he gets that this year. I think going into a completely new offense with a new system, it's just not something that I prefer to put my chips on. And at number 10, Zamir White. We don't really know how good of a back Zamir is. He's never been in a workhorse role for a full season. He's a fine player, but he's just not the archetype of a running back that I like in fantasy. I don't care if you're getting him in round 8, round 9. Like, he doesn't catch the football. He's on a bad offense with a bad quarterback that's not going to be in scoring position often. Yes, I think the Raiders are going to run the football a lot, but how effective is it going to really be? How efficient is Zamir going to be? White is going to rely on touchdowns. And if I don't think Vegas is going to be a good offense, which I don't, then how is Zamir going to get those touchdowns? How is he going to rack up fantasy points? Because he's not doing it through the air. He's not going to be in scoring position often. So where is he going to get his success from? I just don't see the path where Zamir is this breakout running back. I was in on him earlier in the offseason, but now that I've thought about it more, I don't see a path for him to really have a ton of success unless the Raiders have a really good year offensively, which I am just not predicting. So that's all I have for you guys today. I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. Make sure if you got anything away from this video, like the video, subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.